Alrighty, everybody, and joining me here tonight on T Watches a Scary Movie, very good friend of mine. He is absolutely the person that I know I can turn to when I got something that's horror that I need to discuss. This guy is the guy that I got to talk to about it because we're on that same wavelength and everything. So joining me tonight, great person that I know, love getting to talk movies just in general with them. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. John Edward Betancourt from Nerds That Geek. John, how you doing tonight, man?
Hello, thank you. That is a hell of an introduction to follow. I'm doing great, and I'm getting butter on the roll here, so that's phenomenal. Appreciate it.
Hey, man, I got to give you your props because we've talked about it there, but you've been out there busting your ass for years at this point, and as your friend, it's been like one of the coolest things in the world to just see like things like they just keep happening, and I fucking love that because number one, you're a great dude. You're a great person. But number two, your work is amazing. Like it's like really good as well too. Like I like reading your reviews. Like the team of writers that you have that are covering everything. Like you guys put up really engaging articles as well. And like, man, you're on the pulse of everything. Like I swear to God, like there'll be a random like post that goes by on my Facebook. It's like, damn, y'all got that too. Like y'all are into everything right now, man.
Wow. I was not expecting to be this such a warm welcome, and the same goes for you. I mean, it's been a pleasure to know you, T, for as long as I have, and it's great to see you growing this as well. Like I loved your Jerry O'Connell interview. Love the interviews you're landing. You're doing a great job as well. And it's just so wonderful to see you just taking it and running with it and finding all the success that you're finding. So I appreciate it. I thank you for the kind words. We work real hard over there to make this what it is.
You guys really do. And I'm honestly curious about that because, Nerds That Geek have been going for, a few years at this point. And me and you really got connected over the convention scene because, me and you both worked Denver Comic Con. We had a lot of our friends, working the shows as well, too. What brought about Nerds That Geek? Like, tell my audience a little bit here about what Nerds That Geek does and how, where did y'all come from? Basically?
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, we're a pop culture website, and we cover every corner of it that we can, and it continues to expand. Podcasts are a new thing we're starting to talk about and review a bit more. But we want to cover every corner of it. And really, it came out of a sheer disgust of just how negative the internet was and is, I guess is probably the best way to put it, too. I mean, I don't know how many times you go on to see, something about Captain America, and it's about how much I hate Captain America. I'm just sitting here like, well, if you hate him that much, I'm amazed that you can dedicate 1,000 words to him or an hour to him of your podcast time.
Yeah, and why waste it?
We wanted to do something different. And we really wanted to look at the storytelling. I am, having worked in screenwriting, having worked in film a little bit, I'm of the opinion that nobody goes out to make a bad movie. I think, and even the ones that do, but they're doing it on purpose. Like when you look like Kung Pao Enter the Fist. Like that's an intentionally B movie. But it's still done in a manner that doesn't make it terrible. It's fun. It's engaging. It might be culturally insensitive at this particular point, but it still tries to be more. But Airplane, that's supposed to be a B movie that's funny. Yeah. I don't think anybody goes out to actually make a bad movie. I think in their heart and their intentions are to go out and make a great film. But there are circumstances that change that. Casting changes can cause a huge deal in the end. Same goes with shows. I think things can go the wayside in the writer's room, or things can lose focus. I think those are things that make something subpar, so to speak. But I don't want to say terrible. I think it's very rare to find a story that's truly just hot garbage. And we wanted to celebrate that, and that's really what we try to push and do, is just celebrate the storytelling itself and really look at what people are latching onto, what they're talking about, what makes them excited about watching a particular show or a particular movie. And we stuck with that and run with it, and it's taken us very far in a good way, and we're going to stick with it because, I'm in my 40s, but I'm not point where I need to start doing the crotchety old man.
Hey man, you still young. Come on, man. We still going out playing the game right now. Let's go, John. Let's go.
Lots of time before we get to that point of that. That's us in a nutshell. It's a team of brilliant writers. I work with some really talented folks. We do more stuff we're getting into, podcasting, getting back into that stuff like this. We want to start doing more of. But yeah, it's been an absolute honor and an absolute wild ride the last few years, where we've been seeing so much connection and recognition, and just partnerships that are new and exciting for us.
Yeah, and going off something you just got done mentioning as well too. I'm curious, when you and your team come at like reviews or looking into new shows, movies, whatever at that point, do you find that when you're writing a review, when you're thinking about like everything that you went through, like enjoying something, or even if you don't enjoy it, do you find yourself like trying to pull back from being overtly negative? Because I have been seeing what seems to be a shift in reviewers the last like 5 years or so, to where people are trying to get away from saying, like, kind of like what you were going with, like, nobody set out to make a bad movie. So do we come and just say, like, this movie's a piece of shit, like this movie's just garbage? Like, have you seen your process as like a reviewer, as an editor, start to change in the last few years? Because like you said you're trying to get away from the negativity of the internet and everything. So when you look at doing a review for like the films and TV shows that you're getting to watch and experience, how are you approaching that?
I think the biggest thing is for us, maybe it's changed, is we're getting in areas that we haven't done a lot of before. We've definitely had some requests to do some reality TV shows. We definitely had, some of those pop up on our radar, and that's fine. I mean, it's entertainment's entertainment. I think that's the biggest thing is, not being that particular site that's like, well, this is beneath us. This is beneath that particular form of entertainment. I think the biggest thing is if it's not up to snuff, what's the constructive criticism that you could say? Because there's been some movies that I've seen, the production values are lacking. There's no two ways about it. The money's not there. But what did they do to maximize that budget? What did they do constructively to talk about that, that made it worth one's while? And if by chance, that there's still some issues with writing and that type of stuff, what were they trying to accomplish? What's the constructive piece that we can really dive into? Because there's something there. There's a reason that somebody put up the money, be it $1 million or $100 million, to produce this. And that's the whole thing, is that high concept, that wondrous piece that audiences are going to go see in some capacity. It may not be the 20 million people that everybody's hoping for over the weekend, but that's the beauty of television now, is it doesn't have to be 20 million people. It can be a good, loyal audience, and it stays on the air on a streamer. But the question is, what can we constructively discuss? What can we look at that and see? I think that's been a bigger challenge for reality TV, because it can be a little formulaic at times. A lot of it's, you look at a show like, for example, we're not reviewing it, but a great example is Kitchen Nightmares.
Yeah.
Same thing every week. We go in, Gordon's gonna have some concerns. He's gonna eat some really shitty food and probably get sick, and then critique it and fix it. Whether they last or don't last is no thing. But reality TV has a formula for a reason. But what are they trying to accomplish? How are they trying to connect with the audience? What is it that makes this so appealing? Those are the things we want to talk about, latch onto. So I think if there's any change in that, it's just making sure that we maintain that, because it's always hard in writing in general to not be able to be objective, especially when you do it for a while. And not to say that we haven't challenged ourselves or not done new things, but at the same time, how do you remain objective? How do you do that? So that's been the challenge, I think, for us. But I think we've met that challenge very well, in my opinion. But I might be biased because I'm the editor. So
hey, it's hard though, because like I see and I read a lot of the reviews that y'all put out, and so much of that content is stuff like, damn, like, again, this is perfect because this is all the stuff that I'm watching. So y'all have a great channel that's engaging, like, to the people and the stuff that a lot of people seem to be watching. What do you do when it's something that you're just not, like, maybe you're not interested in? You don't have to drop names of movies or shows or anything, but like, what happens when you got something assigned to you or your team that's like, fuck, like, this is just not something that like we care about, not something that we're that interested in? Like, what actually gets you going to review that? Because in my eyes, and it's happened with a few movies I've had to review in the last couple of years, in my eyes, sometimes it seems like it might be hard to not take a negative spin. So like, I'm fighting myself a lot of times to not go on a negative spin with that. What happens when y'all end up approaching like projects and stuff that you're not necessarily excited for?
Be objective. I think that really is it, honestly, is we have to just remember that, this is, I think, the hardest thing in modern journalism, especially with the web and the way that it is now, and even just in mainstream, because you look at how many, just mainstream news sites have a struggle with this, that it has to be opinion, and it has to be, well, I don't care for this, so I have to speak negatively about it. You actually don't. You just look at it for what it is. What is the story? What is the high concept? There are some dramas sometimes that I'm like, okay, this isn't something that I would normally watch. And that's okay. But that's, I think I get excited for it personally, because that's a challenge. This is something that I wouldn't normally talk about, something that I wouldn't normally sit down and dedicate an hour of my time to and take detailed notes and go out and speak to. So how do I make that engaging for me? And that's latching onto those higher concepts and latching onto the deeper meaning of it, and just being objective about it. This is what it's trying to accomplish. Let's just stick with that. Yeah. I think that's the big key, and maybe something that's been lost in a lot of this mix in the last 10 years or so on the internet is, everybody's got to make sure my opinion is in there. Maybe not. Maybe not. I think in some things, yeah, absolutely. If it's, we're looking at a woefully offensive piece of, great example is, I've been revisiting Star Trek: The Next Generation very slowly, because that's a lot of episodes. Look, they the early years were pretty rough.
Oh,
Not as rough as I
God.
remember, because 6, 7-year-old, he was like, "This is the greatest thing I've ever seen. They're on this planet and all these amazing." And I watch it now, I'm like, "Oh my God, this is overtly racist. There's no two ways about it." Um, you
I have to
know,
stop you for a quick second because it's funny. Like thinking of early Next Generation episodes, I remember when I lived in Australia, our public library had like the VHS tapes of like two
yeah,
or three episodes, like the first two seasons. And y'all, if you've never gone back and watched Next Gen, he's not kidding. Like those
yeah,
first few seasons are rough, like worse than the original show ever could be at it. Like it's hokiest at that point.
yeah.
Man. They're bad. They're very bad. But man, does that show come around though? Ooh.
Oh, it
Ooh,
does. Yeah, once you get to season 3, it's the ground running. But that's the
God.
whole point. There's stuff you got to call out. There's stuff that it isn't a matter of opinion. It either is or it isn't. You can sit there and try to spin something that is overtly just what it is. But it's best to not to. It's a being objective and calling it out. And speaking of TOS, that's another one too. Like, man, I did not have as good a time doing those retro recaps for that one. We reviewed all of them again. I went through every single episode, and there are some I'm like, man, this is really bad. Like The Enemy Within is a widely regarded great episode, but it's not a great episode. And I don't care what flag I take for that. Kirk is the epitome of toxic masculinity, I think. And Spock's comment at the end, where he basically says, you're asking for it. That's one of the worst things I've ever seen in television. And I understand other times and other things, but there's no shame in being objective and calling that out. And that's where, it isn't about opinion at that point. Well, it had you to think about the times. Yeah, you can think about the times, but we know that that's wrong now. So let's not put opinion or put a spin on that. Just call it for what it is. So that's the biggest thing, is getting opinion out of a lot of this and just calling it for what it is and really being objective.
See, and I have to kind of touch upon that because there was a movie that I actually got done reviewing recently to where some of the themes that you're bringing up actually have been kind of really big on social media a lot. I don't know, if you've had a chance to really look into it. Dash Cam. Have you seen Dash Cam yet?
I know of it. I have not had the time yet, but it is on my very long list of things to watch.
Yeah, and I enjoyed Dash Cam. I'm a big fan of Rob Savage and Jed Shepard and oh God, I hate it because I should have her name. Gemma Hurdley, I think is her name. I'm gonna look it up because I want to be respectful to the entire team behind that there. But it's the same team that that brought us Host, the Zoom horror film we got on Shudder.
Great movie.
Oh my God, so good, so good now. And there's been a lot of controversy over their latest film, Dash Cam, as their lead character in that is played by a podcaster and a personality out there, Annie Hardy, who has quite a number of unique views in today's world. And what's been interesting is seeing the response to that because maybe I live in a bubble or whatever, and it's rare that we see kind of reactions like that these days. So stream the movie, but what I thought was with a really, really well done film is now kind of getting savaged a little bit because of Annie Hardy's involvement in that. And it's interesting for you to note that, like, at the time, the episode of The Enemy Within, of course, back then, nobody says one word about it. Like, hey, cool, that's the sign of the times. And looking back now, I love the fact that you point out that, you can like it, but you also have to be objective to it as well, too. Like, you have to admit that in 2022, an episode like The Enemy Within may not necessarily be too PC for today's age now.
No, not at all. And I'm glad that it is still out there to be seen, to be fawned over, and yes, it tries to accomplish a lot of great things. But yeah, and but you've seen a lot of that now too. A lot of this, it's this interesting dichotomy now where things that we say on the internet have a lot of meaning, and I'm not saying you need necessarily. No, I mean, you do need to mind your P's and Q's. I mean, be decent, for heaven's sakes. I don't want to sit here and suddenly contradict myself and say, no, behave. It's be decent, I think, is step one. And that's been the hardest thing, I think, for a lot of folks, is just being decent on the internet, because there's that mask of anonymity and there's that detachment where I'm like, well, I can just say whatever the hell I want. And I don't care for that, honestly. I think it's more, I think it takes more effort to be angrier than it does to be kind, and just to call things as they are. And that's I think maybe that's the foundational piece, is just for Nerds That Geek, is just be kind. Let's not be here to do what the angry folks of the internet like to do.
I agree, and I've tried to live by those words there the last few years for sure. Except when it comes to Jurassic World Dominion, that's the one I can't. I can't do it. I can't.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
yeah. Oh man. But oh, y'all make your own decision on that one there.
Yes, exactly. Go out and see it.
And going off before I forget, it was Gemma Hurley. So I was very close. Gemma Hurley, Rob Savage, and Jed Shepard are the creative team behind Host and now Dashcam. But that kind of brings us into, what we're really focusing on here tonight. Now, a movie that you actually dropped. You dropped a couple reviews for this one here. You actually did both a spoiler-free one, encompassing kind of the whole thing, and then you did one focusing on more so the stories that I was really interested in. You got a chance to review horror noir, which we have to applaud you, man, because I got to show up with my friends and everything. Somebody got a quote on a Blu-ray cover now.
I did. I'm pretty proud of it. I'm not gonna lie. That's been on it's been on my goal list for a long time, and it's not an easy thing to do. So it's a huge accomplishment for me. And yeah, it was a very fortunate piece. I mean, what it was we got a chance to see the film in advance through a screener, and then AMC actually took the movie itself and took its 6 stories there and broke it into 3 episodes. Friday nights. Actually, when was the dates on that? That was close to, I have notes. Earlier this year, actually in February. Just because they could. Same network company, Shudder's part of AMC Networks, so that's a chance to go ahead and put it all on TV as well. So it's a great chance to go back and revisit it and really dive deep into those 6 stories. So that's how that actually ended up working out, is we got advanced access to both.
And it's amazing for those of y'all who have never heard of this project before. So a few years back, there was a documentary that was produced on Shudder, I believe, that was called Horror Noir, and it was basically looking at the black culture in horror cinema for the last, we'll go 100 years or so. And they talked about a lot of really, really important movies to the time: Ganja and Hess, Blackula, Tales from the Hood. They also had all popular filmmakers, both behind and in front of the camera, joining this as well. We had authors, and it's a truly, truly powerful documentary. And especially if you're familiar with so many of these films that they're talking about as well, too. And of course, this follow-up, and that's the best way to look at it, in my opinion. It's a follow-up, basically. Yeah, what kind of came out of this documentary was a group of Black filmmakers getting together and making an anthology piece. And I am curious, John, before we kind of deep dive into it, because I've always said that, if slashers are my number 1, then anthology horror is definitely number 2, because I've always loved the idea that within about 2 hours, we can get multiple directors, multiple writers, different casts. They can tell completely different stories. And for good or for better or for worse, there's always going to be something in there you like. Even if there is something in there you hate, there should always be something in there you like. So considering we've had really, really great anthology horror over the last 30, 40 years, both on TV and movies, what's been your experience with anthology horror? Is that something that you tend to gravitate to? Do you like those kind of movies and shows as well?
I grew up with it. So it's absolutely up my list. I mean, mine's a little bit different than your list. I would say anthology is a hard number 2 for me as well. Followed on by zombies, just because I grew up on a steady diet of the living dead. And I have George Romero to thank for that, because the man was a genius. But ironically, it's Romero that led me to anthology horror, because I grew up in the 80s with Tales from the Dark Side. So my Saturdays out here in Denver on KWGN2 was they had the Saturday night slashers, basically. I mean, they would do, very much remember it. They had that weird, I want to say it's from a Western soundtrack from Ennio Morricone. I might be wrong on that, but I remember they had this weird soundtrack, this montage of horrible things, and then it went straight to horror for that till 2 a.m. And midnight was for a long time Tales from the Dark Side. And I love that show. I'm actually going back through them right now on the site, just watching them again, which they are holding up so well, better than I remember, actually, which is amazing. Probably because context is for kings, age brings context. But yeah, that was my first experience with it, and I was there for Tales from the Crypt every episode through. Loved monsters. Loved them. Love when you get anthology horror films. I know they weren't like the cup of tea of the '90s, since I think that was still the tail end of the slasher era. But Tales from the Hood's one that I loved. God, I remember there was one. I can't remember which one it was called now. I want to say it was Campfire Tales.
Oh, with Cyclops, with James Marsden,
yeah. And I remember there's a guy. There's one of the Tales of Terror. Some guy biting into a piece of chicken.
Yep.
And it's like a rat. And I remember that that bothered the crap out of me as a teenager. I don't know why I did, because like that's, I watched The Walking Dead, I watched Roberto Romero movies, I watched some really messed up stuff now, but it was the rat that got me somehow. So for me, this resurgence right now between horror noir, creep show, whatever else is in the pike, it's just it's heavenly. It's the renaissance that I've been waiting for.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, especially, I mean, granted, like this has always been a thing. Like, and it's interesting you mentioned Tales from the Dark Side, because compared from the movie to the TV show, the movie had like that wraparound tale, which is something that you mentioned in one of your reviews for horror noir as well too, about the idea of there being or there not being a wraparound tale in these stories. And some of you are probably familiar with this, is that a lot of anthology films out there, they do have some kind of wraparound story, as it's called, that takes place out of all these other tales that either maybe ties them together or there's some loose continuity between them there. And horror noir is unique, one of the unique ones, because there is no wraparound tale. Literally, it's start to end, each story, move to the next one, move to the next one, move to the next one. And again, for those of y'all that haven't seen it, we have 6 different stories in horror noir itself, each telling about a different kind of horror, different kind of monster, whatever you want to call it at that point. And the ones that I really wanted to, to at least touch upon here were ones like The Lake, like Sundown, and definitely the one that I was enjoying, I think, the most now, which was, let me see if I can remember it here, The Brand of Evil. The Brand of Evil. That's right now. So 3 different tales out of the 6 here. One of them being about a teacher who returns back to a former home of hers and finds out that there might be a monster that's terrorizing this lake that she's moved to. Sundown, about a group of activists who end up in a town to where the racial tensions might not be the only thing that they have to worry about when the sun goes down. And then, of course, Brand of Evil, when you find out how much would you sell your soul and other people's soul for a little bit of success, even if it hurts your own community. And John, I know you did reviews of, like, because you did a spoiler heavy review of both The Lake and Brand of Evil. So clearly those stories stood out to you the same way that they stood out to me, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, actually, it's a tough one, because there's not a second of horror noir that I didn't enjoy. I mean, I sat there and watched the screen the first time, edge of my seat, I think I had to go back and watch it again to get my notes down, because I was just tranced the first time around. And it's very hard for me to pick favorites out of this. But if we're going to elevate 3 out of the 6, those are the 3 that I would elevate, in all honesty. I think they definitely stuck out. I mean, Lake was a great way to start it. Brand of Evil is genius, and Sundown is that perfect blend of commentary and comedy and terror. But they're all just 3 wonderful, wonderful episodes through and through.
And considering the fact that between all 3 of those, we're dealing, again, very, very different stories, which we've mentioned. It's one of the best things about anthology horror. You don't have to worry about telling the same story over. So we get, a lake monster or siren versus vampires versus, Satan at that point, basically. And I am curious, because I got to kind of put you on the spot with this here. We know that obviously a movie like Tales from the Hood, there's a lot of social and political commentary in that film about how things were going at the time. And it's a movie that's still relevant today, honestly, with things that are going on in our world.
Very relevant.
And coming at it from, you're not a Black person, basically, but watching these stories there, how, like, were they invoking any feelings from you, some of the subject matter that we got across all of these different tales in this movie? Now, like, how did you feel, especially in this crazy world that's gotten even so much more crazier over the course of this pandemic the last few years now? What kind of things were you feeling when you got to check this movie out for the first time?
I think for me, it was a matter of shutting up and learning. I think that's actually why I went to see, one of the main reasons I want to see horror noir. It was on my list before, and I put up a priority list to watch it, the documentary, when it first came, when it went back in 19 and 20, just because of the fact that, those were, well, more so 20, because it was that tumultuous time. And it was an opportunity to learn, is what it came down to from horror noir. Because, you know what, do I understand, do I understand the complete history of Black horror? No, I don't. Did that help that a lot? Absolutely. And it helped speak to, I'm a big, I love underlying commentary on horror. It's another reason I'm a big fan of George Romero. He's the guy that taught everybody that you can make a compelling and entertaining movie and have a ton of depth underneath it, and do both, and never keep one side of the fan base out of it. If you want that depth, it's there when you want it. If you don't want that depth, here's a guy getting torn in half. It's all there as you need it to be. So to go through and learn about the commentary and to start seeing some of the societal issues it was dealing with is to me just a great learning experience that I need to know better. I need to know those things. But at the same time, I'm somebody who I try to stay as in touch with the world as I can. So, reading what I can about the world, reading what I can about what's happening in it is something that I think is very important. You should stay educated on that. I don't think education stops when you graduate college or whatever level of education you complete. You need to be educating yourself about the world, because that's what you're in now. It's not a classroom. It's not tests. It's the world, and it can be a very mean and angry place, and it can be a very wonderful place too. But that's what those three, two of the three for sure stuck out for me was just keeping my pulse on that, listening to what's happening on social media, listening to the news, because despite what people will tell you, there are very biased channels out there if you just take a minute to ignore the opinion portion and just watch the news. So for me, it was very much a learning experience and a good perspective, because this movie is written and directed by Black voices. A good perspective that I know I'm getting an honest perspective on, that I'm really getting a chance to learn and understand what appropriation is here, because that to me is what Brand of Evil is about, is appropriation, and the socioeconomical disparity that this is a great way that we can I apologize if I'm talking out of turn here in this respect, but of keeping Black people down. Here's a boatload of money if you just stay compliant.
Wow. And I'm curious because again, especially in the news, the last 3 years, it's just, again, it's like every day there's something in the news there that's just heavy to get on. Do you think, and I'm sure I get the answer to it, but do you think that it's easier to come at like some of these more sensitive topics and things that we're plagued with in our world today? It's easy to come at that when it's under the guise of like a horror movie, for example, like, hey, like, there's inequality and there's appropriation and there's indifference and there's all this stuff, there's bigotry. But if we put the devil in there, if we put a vampire in there, it's easier for us to engage. It's easy for us to swallow it. So like, do you feel that, at least for you, it's easier to kind of pick these issues up, to kind of like sort through the muck of everything that's happening in our world when it's presented in a format like this, versus something like reading a news story or watching something on the news now?
Probably. Because horror again is my favorite genre. And all my favorite horror films in my top 10 lists are all horror movies. And that's what horror has always done. It doesn't matter what the monster is or what generation it's coming from. Each monster that exists deals with something either primal or something societal. Sundown, the vampires here just being good old boy West Virginia racists, just stand for whatever allegory they stand for. But you look at Dracula, he's very much kind of that fear of death, that desire for immortality and the cost that comes with it. The werewolf has always been about our internal fears about our darker, I don't call them darker angels, our darker demons, I guess is probably the best way to put it, because that's what the werewolf is. It's this primal instinct coming out, and we see it. You see it when people snap, they go out and do horrible things. They're that werewolf, so to speak. And the Living Dead have always been my favorite, because they stand in for everything. There's they were, when you look at George Romero's body of work, they were that changing of the guard that we were hoping was going to happen in the 60s. The old guard struggling with the new guard. They were the consumers in Dawn of the Dead. They were establishment in Day of the Dead. They were the problems we love to ignore to this day in Land of the Dead. The voyeurism of Diary of the Dead, the politics and survival of the dead. It's all there. So for me, yes, very easy, because you go into Brand of Evil, and it's very obvious, that the monster here is the racist white man. Simple as that. The one that wants that control. And same goes for Sundown. It is probably the most timely of all of them. I think Brand of Evil can be more timeless, because this is nothing new, as I'm to understand. But you look at Sundown, that's 6 o'clock news right there. It really is.
And Sundown was like, I love you pointed out the comedy of Sundown, because one thing that always catches me off guard anytime is Peter Stormare. Like, I swear to God, like, I don't think I could ever be mad at that man. I don't know if I could ever have an angry bone against him because I'm sure there's other people like me, and I don't even like Armageddon. But so many people go back to thinking about him helping to save the world in Armageddon. So whether he's playing Satan, like in Constantine, or he's a vampire, like in this, I was like, you know what? I don't believe you're a racist, sir. I don't believe you're like that. You seem like you're too damn good for that there now, sir. It's like, God, like, you're too damn good of a person. Like, you can't do it. And I know that sounds like an insult, Peter Stormare, but it's not. You just seem like a really good person that I don't believe has a racist bone in their body, honestly.
I don't think I've ever heard a bad story about him in my travels. That's for sure. And I agree with you. I think it was more so, I think, just you know what, him popping up on screen when he does show up. Number one,
Yep.
You light up because it's like, oh, Peter, this is going to be great. You know, he's going to do some amazing things, and he does.
Yes.
But at the same time, he does lend gravity to it because there's a real gravitas that he has on screen, no matter what he's doing. I don't care if it's, you know, the 5 seconds he's in a John Wick or you know, he always has a gravity to the scenes that he pulls. So the gusto that he puts into that sells what it needs to sell. But I mean, I'm agreeing with you. Yeah, you know, the actor is, you know, far better than that vampire that he plays.
Hey, I'm with you there. So I got to hit on this because you mentioned him. You said you love Romero, and you actually went through and named a lot of the influences across all the films that he did in the Living Dead series. Is there a favorite? Like, do you have a favorite out of the entire series? You would say,
oh, hands down, Dawn. That is that is the first zombie film I ever saw, and I've always taken a little bit of eyebrow for this, but I saw it when I was 5. Now, I didn't see the bad parts. My mom wasn't cool on that, but she rented it, and she, you know, go do this for me real quick when something's coming. She knew what it was. She'd seen it, you know, out the same year that I was born. So, you know, it worked out well. Saw it when I was 11, rented it, and it scared the shit out of me. I couldn't sleep that night. It was a double header problem. I watched that. Made the mistake of trying to eat dinner during that. That was a bad idea. Because I'd never seen the things that I'd seen in that movie before. Thank you, Tom Savini, for the nightmares. And then Life Force was on later that night too, because it was Saturday.
My God.
There's another horrifying zombie film. I will never forget some of the shots of that. I mean,
oh my God, bro! At 11,
a meal, and I saw that at night. So we go, you know, and I think, oh, I got this. I'm fine. You know, we watch Saturday Night Live. We go to bed. I close my eyes. They pop right back open, and that was that. That was the summer of low sleep. It terrified me to my core, and to have a movie do that, that's the only one that's ever really done it. Like Day of the Dead did it too, but to a far lesser extent. That traumatized me to no end. And you know, my parents let me do it. They were cool about it. They explained things later, but in that moment, it was rough. So Dawn is my all-time favorite because of that reason. It was one of the scariest movies I've ever seen. It still is. I mean, I watched after Daniel Krauss and George Romero brought out The Living Dead in book form. The timeline kind of gets established finally. Yeah. So I watched them all in the same timeline. I watched them all in that order now pretty frequently. But now they come out of the pandemic, and now that we've come out or slowly coming out of the pandemic, I shouldn't say it's over. Let me not do that. Let me not be that guy. Yeah. As we start to move slowly towards endemic, to watch Dawn of the Dead now and see that opening television sequence, it hits way harder than it did 2 years ago. Like, it was always strong to me, but these, you know, to have deniers on the stage there in that of this virus or whatever cataclysm event it is, and to see the chaos, I'm just like, wow, this documentary just doesn't have the zombies yet. So that's my all-time favorite, Dawn of the Dead. It is a masterpiece to me.
I love it. And because it like similar experiences with that, like, I can't tell you if it was the first, but I think it was in the first 3 zombie movies I saw for sure. Because I want to say I distinctly remember seeing the Savini Night of the Living Dead first, and then Dawn, and like you obsessed with Dawn like crazy. And I remember reading the script all the time, but the original script where Peter and Fran both die at the end of it.
Yep, that's the one. Yeah, I actually went to them all.
You did, so you got a chance to visit it then.
Yeah, I actually got to ride the JCPenney elevator, which I don't know how they shot in that thing. It is tiny. So Patrick Warnick, you are a lensing, he's a master of photography. Yeah. It was very eerie, very weird to be there. It's changed now. I think the irony of it is, I don't know if anybody knows this story, but obviously JCPenney is no longer there because JCPenney is no longer around. Yep. And that elevator was being torn out, and Living Dead Museum was like, well, then give it to us. We'll buy it. We'll do what we got to do because it's a piece of film history. So they got it, and they moved it to Evans City. the home of Night of the Living Dead,
Mhm.
and they had it on display there. And then the pandemic came, and no one's going to the Living Dead Museum, obviously, because no one's going anywhere. So they had to close down. And they had to close. They lost their lease on their building. And ironically enough, Monroeville Mall was like, we have some space, and they were able to renegotiate that. So now the Living Dead Museum is in the mall, and on the second floor is the very elevator that was there to begin with.
Yes. That's kismet. That's 100% kismet at that point now.
That'll
Love
say
it.
what you say. I don't know what does.
Oh man. Okay. Well, John, we're reaching the end here of our interview. So I'm going to ask you a question that I ask all the people that come on to the show here now, but it's got to be a little different because, in the past, when I brought on filmmakers to the show, I've always asked them about a sequel to a project that they've done and give us some smoke, whether it's true or not, about a sequel to what it could be. I asked Sean Linden, what would Hunter x Hunter 2 look like now? And he gave some very fun answers about what would go down in that film with Camille Sullivan and the wolf in that film, which I thought was absolutely hilarious. So I'm curious, John, let's say we got a chance to get another Romero movie. We're gonna go that route there.
Sure.
So we get a chance to get another Romero movie, and we had Diary, we had Survival, and that was it at that point. There, Survival was the last Living Dead film that we got there. But if Romero is still with us, he's given carte blanche. He's given the money to do whatever he wants here at this point. But you are acting as Romero at this point. Where does the next Living Dead film go? What are we looking at in a 2022 Living Dead film?
That's a tough one. Because see, this is a unique one because Suzanne Romero, his widow, recently made it known that there was a very, very loose treatment of what would be a finale. It's been explored. I haven't heard much past this point, but I know that she has entertained writers. She's entertained directors to talk about the possibility of doing Twilight of the Dead, is what I understand the title was.
Okay.
And ironically enough, the Living Dead that Daniel Krauss finished, that I had a chance to speak with interview as well. He was just a delight to talk to. He's a brilliant man. Mainly because George was planning to write this book. It was going to be his magnum opus, because no budget here. There's no worries about budget constraints. Speaking of that, he can do whatever he wants. There's some sequences in there that are pretty wild, like Living Dead on aircraft carrier. You guys say more. But what made that so powerful is, number one, when Daniel gets into it, I can't tell where Romero begins and Daniel ends. There's a couple spots that I'm like, I think I got it. I might be wrong. Second to that, it's this beautiful sweeping piece that finally puts everything into a timeline, that finally gives us a pseudo ending. Mm-hmm. But I would say, if we're talking 2022, I think it would need to be a very bleak film. Mm-hmm. I think if I was ever given the chance to write Twilight of the Dead, not that I've ever thought about anything like that or anything.
Never.
Not that I might have, when I was 19, written something similar and gotten it to Tom Savini just by calling him. That never might have happened.
That'd be insane, John. Why would you do that?
Yeah, 19-year-old John would never do that. But I think if there was a chance to do it, what I've always loved, again, is everything he does is about the times. And it's always there. Survival of the Dead really kind of predicted the political landscape that we're sitting in now, where it's, no, I'm right, and no, I'm right, and nothing gets done. And the pandemic is a great example of that, because it was, nope, this is my belief, this is my belief. If we just worked together on that, we'd have been fine.
Like literally two warring families, just make peace and we can be good now.
Exactly. And when you want blue and red, I don't care which side you saw them on, it says no more. It's Democrat, Republican, and it's the same shit, different day in Washington. Simple as that. Exactly. But the Living Dead taps a little bit into the dangers of the cycles we run into. There's a very Trump-esque character in that, it speaks to, how the natural order is upset. So I would say that, and probably just knowing George too, because he always wanted to really capture that zeitgeist. I think the Twilight of the Dead would be a very bleak ending. I think it would be the kind of ending where it'd be gory as hell, of course, because, you got to have that. Yep. But I think when we get to the subtext and the finale piece, we would see the death of death. We would see the end of the Living Dead, but at what cost? I think it would be the kind of scenario where it'd be a stalemate. There is and I think for one reason alone, there's a great documentary out there called The American Nightmare that IFC put out ages ago. Mm-hmm. And there's a professor in there, and I don't remember the name. That's my bad, because I watched this thing a lot, which I should know the name by now. But there's a quote in there that this professor fires off that says to me, the summation of horror and the summation of just humanity, in that, it's always on the brink. We always seem to be one step away from whatever disaster it's going to be. Let me peel back from it, and there's peace, and then we're back to it again. Just this cycle of it. And I feel like that's how Twilight of the Dead and the Dead Saga would end. It would be about the cycle. Like, yes, the dead are gone. It's that past that 15-year time frame that Doc Logan said we're probably going to have. And what now? What did we learn from all of this? And I think it's a question we can definitely apply to 2020. What did we learn the past 2 years of the pandemic? I think for some of us it was a wake-up call in a good way. Like, this is my chance this is nature saying, I can take this away from you as quick as I gave it to you. Go do something with it. As opposed to the folks that want to get back to normal. Just want to get back to, to brunch and mimosas and nothing more, and read back, dig back into their side. And I think that question would be a great way to end that saga, because that is the eternal question for humanity. What comes next? Where are we going from here? And what are we going to do to get there? Because we don't think about it at all.
I love it. And that's, I mean, you hit all the important themes at that point, because I do have to agree. I mean, like, if Romero was still around today, bless his soul, like, I feel he'd have a field day with the last like three, like, not even going because bless his heart, he's been gone for a little while at this point, but just the last 3 years he'd have a field day with. And it's interesting because I'd almost be like, damn, like, we have to go back to Night of the Living Dead, because literally that's what he was talking about in there. But it's like, dude, like, you couldn't even imagine, George, like, you couldn't even imagine where the fuck we are in this world now.
Yeah, I think the one that catches me off the most of all of his works, I mean, well, all of it does. I mean,
sure,
change from night. I mean, the changing of the guard is still happening.
Yeah.
You're seeing the boomer generation now fighting desperately to be replaced by the next generation, and that's Harry Cooper in a nutshell. But nothing changed there. Harry Cooper still doesn't like black people. Yep. Plain and simple. There's no denying that particular subtext. You're a fool if you think it didn't happen. It's obvious what Harry's problem was in this movie, and it was Ben. But that didn't change. And consumerism and Dawn, we got plenty to discuss there. I mean, it hasn't changed either. People would definitely fight for a mall, I think, in this day and age still. And maybe not a mall, but they definitely fight for their favorite Best Buy.
Oh yeah.
The hate of establishment is still there. It didn't change. We thought that pushback against the Reagan years was going to come to something else. Nope, just continues to be, we're sick of the government. Diary perhaps more. I mean, right now, for example, look at this. We're on webcams. We're talking. We're putting out ourselves in a voyeuristic fashion. The irony is not lost upon me. We'd already talked about survival's portion of it, but the one that caught me off guard the most right now is Land of the Dead, because it's America in 2022. And I know it was intended to be a post 9/11 allegory, but holy shit,
it's accurate.
Rich living in this beautiful tower with all the wonders and beauty of the world, and everybody else living in a world of shit while horrible things, or in this instance, a pandemic, is surrounding you. Jesus, George.
Yeah.
What did you know that we didn't know? So I mean, it's always been there. But I mean, I think he always just looked at things very, very on the level. Simple as that. He just saw things for what they were, and he's like, this is probably how it go down. And boy, was he right.
There it is. And that's a perfect way to encapsulate it, honestly. And it is scary. It is scary to think how timely all of his films still are. Like, anytime right now you can look at it and be like, yep, that's timely. That works. Like, there's a lot. And that makes him even more scarier and very cool as a filmmaker, to think that, like you said, he's had his finger on the pulse for so long, even past at this point for how many years, and his finger is still on the pulse of this world right now.
It's the truth. And to bring it around, my hope is that a movie like Horror Noir is going to hold up in that same vein, because when you look at the lake, and and to me, the lake was always about the darkness we carry within and not being able to confront it.
Yeah,
I think it's a timeless theme that definitely can hang out for generation upon generation, because heavens knows generational trauma is a new thing that we're really kind of talking about finally. Land of Evil, that hasn't changed since the release of this film. Sundown is as on the money as it gets. Fugue State, there's a great example of another one that that has all that depth to it. When you talk about back to the pandemic, those things there, they all have their beautiful significance and pieces that they can connect to. And I hope that this is as timeless as it as well. That people will continue to fawn over it the way they fawn over these other movies, because they should.
Definitely. And with that, John, I thank you so much for joining me tonight. Is there anything from Nerds That Geek that you would like to plug? What do you guys have coming up for yourself? What can
Oh
we
man, it's stuff that I can't talk about because I'm under like impromptu spoiler alerts that I can't talk about. There's a bunch of new shows coming out in August that we're going to be covering. I'll put it that way.
There it is. And can we expect so everybody's favorite stuff there? What do you have coming up later this year that everybody can least expect that you can talk about there? What are you guys bringing back?
Actually, I'll tell you this: things that I can't talk about, things that we're planning on doing. We're going to do some new things this summer and this fall. You know, I think what's interesting about television is that it just kind of ends these days. There's so much in the cycle now that I don't feel like, and myself even, I don't feel like I celebrate series finales enough. And there's been quite a few in the past couple of years. Some decidedly so, some not so decidedly so. But you know, Better Call Saul is coming up on its very end here, and we really want to celebrate that differently. We're going to be doing a very grand retrospective of episodes that really stand out from that series, the very best of the best, the kind of stuff that some will agree with, some will disagree with. That's okay. That's the discourse. But stuff that I personally, thought was just the cream of the crop of the series. Because if I don't talk about chicanery again, I'm gonna lose my mind. And that whole monologue from Michael McKean, oh, so good. And it's going to be a similar send-off for The Walking Dead. We've got a very grand countdown for its final 8 episodes. We definitely have the same thing, the very best of The Walking Dead. We're planning on talking about the 10 of those 10 seasons worth of stuff. Again, I'm sure it'll be highly controversial because there's so many episodes people love. Yep. We'll be doing some bigger stuff like that as fall comes on. And then obviously, as your favorites come back, we'll be covering them. As soon as Ted Lasso comes back, cannot wait to cover that again. It is one of the finest shows I've seen in years. But yeah, as they come, we go. But for the big stuff, yeah, we're going to start celebrating some of the ends here because it's been a big year of endings for TV.
Yeah. And it's interesting. Think about The Walking Dead because, man, like it feels like yesterday when I was like, you know me, like I DJ weddings and corporate events, stuff like that now. But when The Walking Dead first started, I was knee deep doing bar flare shows and like bingo and shit like that and horror trivia sometimes at bars. And I remember I actually showed the pilot episode of The Walking Dead at the TGI Fridays that is now an In and Out near the Aurora Mall here in Aurora during a trivia show. Because it's that long ago. And to think that this is it, that we're finally here at the last season. I know we got movies coming and there's still a spin-off, but the fact that it's finally here, like it's the end of The Walking Dead. That's kind of crazy.
It is. And it's special to me. I mean, I just went off on a vomit fest about The Living Dead in general for the past, half hour or so. And that's why, because you know what, to have gone from an era when people were like George Who, and like, oh yeah, brains and all that stuff to did you watch The Walking Dead last night? To know that 10 million people are still watching it, I mean, I know they're like, oh, the ratings suck now, and it's still on the air. Like, it is. And it still rakes in a lot more ratings than some other shows on major networks because it's still got a very loyal following. To know that happened in my lifetime and to have actually had a chance to talk with Greg Nicotero in that process for Creep Show, but still to talk to Greg Nicotero because, I mean, I don't know if that show would have made it 100% without him and KMB effects.
Not a chance.
Being the Romero disciple that he is and being as inventive as they were with stuff they did. Just to have all that experience, it's just been such a beautiful ride. It's going to be I don't get teary-eyed about a lot of things, but that might be one that I get pretty somebody chopping onions about.
And you guys do some of the best coverage of it, so we're excited to see it. So folks, you got to check out Nerds That Geek. You can go to nerdsthatgeek.com. You can follow them on Twitter at Nerds That Geek. Find them on Facebook. Great team. John is the leader of it there. And he runs an awesome ship, folks. So please make sure you are going and following and subscribing to Nerds That Geek so you can keep up on all their great coverage of not just horror, but just in general, great TVs and movies as well, folks.
Pop culture. We love it. And make sure you're watching T-Show, please, because this is a great network to be on. So, folks, please give him all the support you need. He has some wonderful things to say. You're standing here. I don't want saying he. You do some great commentary and you offer some great insight on horror, and you're doing a great job. And folks, please subscribe to T. Please,
my man.
Worth it.
Well, John, thank you so much for joining me here on T Watches a Scary Movie. Hey everybody, I appreciate you checking out this video, whether it was a review, whether it was a new episode, whether it was an unboxing, an interview, or whatever else. I want to remind you can check out my separate reviews also on my YouTube page, and new full episodes go up every Wednesday night on YouTube at 8:30 p.m. Mountain Standard Time and on your favorite podcasting platforms at 8 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, like and share. My name is T. We've been talking scary movies. Stay scared.